Hello, welcome infinite beings to the infinite me, where we're talking about everything to do with living in the infinite zone. So you don't have to awaken to your powers, you don't have to ascend to them, you've already got them all, but it's here to remind you what they are and to wake up and use them in your everyday life.
Yes.
So I'm Mandy, and over there is Nat. And every day we're showing up to talk about a topic in the moment, about how to live infinitely, and so that could look like anything. So we'll talk about yesterday. We did talk about the we're a little bit later today with our broadcast, but we're still in the time zone of Nat. It's still her daytime for Paris, so
yep.
just getting it in before the close of the day.
For Thursday, the 22nd.
So we're still on the 22nd technically. So yesterday we spoke about the stages of the awakening journey, and what that can kind of, not that there's distinct stages, I guess, as such, but just there does seem to be sort of some commonalities, if you like, between people's journeys. So we just discussed that and what that can potentially look like, and some of the challenges that arise, and some tips and tricks, I guess, for along the way and how it can unfold for you. So check that one out.
Yep.
And as if you haven't seen, we've been doing what we've been calling an infinite lucky dip. So we've got this little bag of like topics that we've been writing and adding into there. And the idea is that we just pull out one in the moment, and that's what our topic is for the day. So we never really know what's going to come up. So
anyone's guess.
Sure.
Here we go. It is, the topic of the day is
good one.
One of those. We'll put it back to the other one.
We're both a bit tired because it's early morning for me and late at night for Nat.
Really late here.
We'll see how it goes.
So if it's not a long one, otherwise we might have to do a part 2, because I'll probably be asleep in about 15 minutes.
This one is one I wrote down. It's called Feeling into the Shadows versus Avoiding Them.
Ooh.
And this was sparked by a excerpt that I read from a post on Facebook, which was from the book Grounded Spirituality, which is by Jeff Brown. And he writes all about kind of he's very into spiritual consciousness world, but very anti the New Age movement, if you like, because there is a lot of stuff I guess people got caught into, which is not really helpful at the end of the day too. So people get very stuck in, say, positive thinking only and never, which is kind of where this post come from a little bit too. It's just like, you can't be positive all the time. You do have to actually look at some of the shadow stuff that comes up, because that is the stuff that can hold us back. That's where all our power is hidden. That's where the stories hold the most power for us. If we don't look at them, we can't essentially move past them to the degree that we can if we don't look at them, sort of thing. Yeah. So they will come back up in other various forms if you don't sort of address them, I guess. So, and it's not that you have to sit there and analyze. Definitely not here about analyzing things at all. But the whole point, I guess, of the human game is to move past your limitations. So if you don't look at them, how are you meant to kind of get the full effect of gaining your power back out of them and living infinitely? Because that's the thing that will help you to live infinitely, is moving past any of that shadow ego stuff that's going to come up to get in your way. So so that's where that one come from. So
what's just read it to me again.
So it was good if I had found that inside. Actually, I did save it to my Facebook page, but I don't know if I could put it all up quickly. It's called Feeling into the Shadows versus Avoiding Them.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of people will kind of not want to look at stuff that's coming up, if you like. They'd rather push it down and repress it and sort of hide it away, and not, because we think it's really scary to kind of go through it. So, but that is where all the juice is. Like, that's all the stuff that's holding you back is hidden in those things. And so actually going through them is the thing that's going to free it up for you. And it does feel scary. That's the thing. It feels really scary, but only to the ego. It's not feeling scary to the soul. It feels very expansive to the soul to move through that shadow stuff that is coming up. But there is a lot of spirituality stuff that that does almost avoid looking at any of that dark stuff, almost like you want to invite it in. There's a lot of mentality around, which is why Jeff Brown wrote all this stuff around that, is because there's a lot of teachers and things around different modalities and things that almost basically say, oh, if you focus on that, then you're inviting it into your life. So just don't even look at any of the dark stuff. Like, it's bad energy, and it's keep your energy vibration high. And that's all true too, that, you know, keeping your energy level high and things like that. But you do have to kind of look at some of that other stuff, because otherwise it is just repressing it under the surface, and it will come up in various ways in different parts of your life until you actually look at it. So you can't avoid it at the end of the day. That's on the, you know, awakening to an infinite being, you cannot avoid it. So it's just, you do have to go through it and look at it. So
yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? Like, you sort of say a lot of people avoid it because of the pain of it, but I also think a lot of people avoid it because we've just not been taught how to deal with it.
Yeah, that's true too.
Like in a way that's meant to be dealt with. And so the positive thinking, and see why the positive thinking movement has taken off so much, because it's like, oh, I don't even have to deal with it then.
Like, yeah, well,
I'll subscribe to the positive thinking movement. Yeah, like, why wouldn't I?
And that's called that the spiritual bypassing, I think they call that. Yeah, where you just don't look at anything. Yeah. So,
yeah. Well, I've certainly had plenty of people I've met and stuff that won't engage in anything that is remotely negative in their experience, because they have such a fear of inviting it in, or creating it, or, you know, saying to the universe that it's okay to have it in their space, that energy and stuff like that. And so it's almost like they're living in constant fear of having anything negative in their space.
Yeah.
It's like, well, that's not really freedom either. So, so it's sort of quite interesting. But to be honest with you, it's, I guess I never really, I don't think I ever sort of purposely went into the positive thinking motion type thing. Like when we first started personal development stuff, it was in network marketing terms. And we were doing lots of, you know, I guess it would be deemed as positive thinking and rah-rah and success mindset and all that sort of stuff. And a lot of it was centered obviously around money and you know, success and lifestyle and all those sorts of things. And it wasn't really until we did Dr. John Demartini's work where he actually sort of introduced the concept of duality, and that for every positive there was a negative, and for every negative there was a positive, and so everything is essentially balanced. It's only the mind that sees one side more than the other.
Yes.
And so it's sort of, when you go through that process and see the science behind it, it's like there actually is no positive. It's all made up. So what you see as a positive event, I might see as completely negative. So it's all really so subjective to everybody about this whole positive thinking thing. It's like in any moment, a group of people see all different types of things in any one event. So it's sort of like, is it positive or negative? Well, it's, at the end of the day, it's neither. Everything is actually balanced in truth. And it's only the ego that sees the positive or negative side of things, and the mind. So it's sort of like the whole idea of positive thinking actually is a bit ridiculous when you really dive into the science behind it. It's like it doesn't even exist. So
yeah, that's true too. It's very one-sided, isn't it? It's only one half of human reality. It's not even the infinite.
That's right. And it's impossible to always be positive, because the mind is actually meant to find its corresponding negative as well. So if it finds positive, it'll always find a negative, and if it finds a negative, it'll always find a positive. So it actually isn't capable of only thinking positive. It actually has to have its corresponding other half.
Yes.
So it's like at some stage, as you say, you're going to run into the darkness. You're going to run into the negative stuff. As we label it, and it's all just labels. At some point, you're going to have to deal with it, because it's going to keep coming up. The more positive you are, the more negative you're going to actually invite in. Funny enough. So it's the very thing that you're avoiding is actually the thing you're going to run into. Universal principle. So at some point, you have to deal with it. So 100%. And I must admit, like all through my transformation, I've been very conscious to say to myself, you know what, I'm gonna have to deal with this at some stage because it's come up. So I might as well just get on with it right now. And that's what I've done. That's definitely the approach I've had for everything that in the whole journey for the last 15 years at this stage. It's just like, just get on with it, deal with it now, and then it just, you don't have to worry about it anymore type thing. Sort of, I mean, it does come back, of course, sometimes, but you know what I mean.
Yes.
You're moving through layers and quantums as you go type thing, so it's definitely shifting stuff.
Yeah, I think so too. And I was going to say, I think most people that do try to live positively, like if they were to really honestly look at, only live like in the positive, I mean, if they were to really look at their life and how they actually feel majority of the time, they would notice that they probably can't maintain that positive feeling. They're probably really kind of frustrated in a certain part of their life because it's just, it's just impossible to maintain that positivity all the time, because it isn't actually the natural state to be. Like, we are always being brought back into that equilibrium neutral space, and that's talking about that is the natural space of the infinite. It can't be any other way. So you're actually trying to live outside of physics, really. Like, if you're trying to always be positive, like it's just impossible. It will be brought back into balance. Like, so you do have to kind of step in and look at that stuff coming up, as Nat said. And I've probably been the same, like jumping into stuff when it comes up, because it will keep presenting something that you've got a lot of power in, will keep coming up for you to look at in various ways in your life. So it may show up in a relationship, but if you don't address it there, it might show up in, you know, at work, or it will show up in your finances. So like it will keep showing up. Or you start getting a health thing because you're just not addressing something. Your body's trying to wake you up to see something. So you will not avoid it at the end of the day. So you may as well kind of just, it's almost like that whole ripping a Band-Aid off quickly thing. It doesn't actually, it doesn't hurt anywhere near as much as you often think it's going to. Like yes, it will hurt, but only to the ego. Like it's only the ego that is judging it in the first place as being a negative space to go into, as Nat was talking about. So from that soul perspective, the more we can keep reminding ourselves that we're an infinite being and we're not the ego and we're not this little human body here, we are the infinite, the more we keep feeling into that, reminding ourselves of that, like it's not as scary to go into those places, because it isn't actually a real concept anyway. It's just it's a human-made limitation that we put on ourselves. And yes, we may have been telling ourselves that for many, many years, and it feels really true. But when we start to strip it back, we kind of see it for what it actually is, and it is always just that illusion that we've bought into, and it's never as like solid as we think it is. Like once we start to strip it back,
it's definitely not solid when you dive into it. Like it's sort of quite interesting to sit with it, and I guess you got like two components to it, like of anything like this. It's the story part and then the feeling part, and it's sort of like you really see how flaky the story actually is when you really start to dive into it a little bit, or sort of just look at it and sort of go, oh my God, like I keep repeating the same story over and over again. Like it's ridiculous. Like how many times this has come up in so many different forms if you've not dealt with it. And then there's the feeling aspect to it. And I really feel like when you sit with it, and this is really the way to move through it, is to actually sit with it, give it space, give it time, give it whatever it needs type thing, and just attention, I guess, placing your attention on it and just allowing it to move through your body. Like you might feel it somewhere physically, you may not. But just sitting with the energy of it, I think the more you do sit with it, the more it just feels like energy. And it doesn't even really hold a darkness or a lightness or anything to it type thing. And you know, a lot of different modalities and stuff will say name it or give it a color or what does it look like or whatever sort of thing. Like it's almost not about doing that, because then it's just, they're sort of more just labels from the ego. Again, we're back in storyland again, like we've just made it up. So it's almost like not doing that and actually just sitting purely with the feeling, stripping it back until you get to the actual raw feeling sitting underneath all the storyland. And then just being with it, because it really does dissipate. Unless it's a really strong feeling, it really just dissipates within seconds, maybe a couple of minutes, and then that's it. It's gone. Like it's like, oh, what was that? And then half the time, it's so interesting. Like, you know, Jody or somebody might ask me about like, oh, what was the thing, that was coming out? I was like, actually, I can't remember. Like, I honestly,
it often goes out of your
the whole thing is gone. Like like you don't even have like a memory of it, and you're sort of like really grasping at straws of like, oh, what was that scenario thing that I was just talking about, the story or the feeling? Like, actually, I don't know. Like, I can't remember. Like, I literally can't remember.
Yeah, definitely. It does. It's like you don't need that. You don't need it anymore. So why do you need to remember it? It just literally goes out of your consciousness. Yeah, It's like dissolved it, and it's not there to even reference anymore. Yeah, it's quite a bizarre feeling sometimes.
Yeah,
when that happens.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about what you're saying about there's different modalities that kind of label. You find where that thing is in your body. Because usually the feeling will present somewhere in your body, those emotions that we feel, like we feel them in the physical body somewhere, could be like in your gut or something, or it could be real head-based. Or it could be really head-based feeling or something. But so sometimes those, this probably goes a little bit with yesterday's talk in terms of like sometimes those things are really good as a stepping stone. On the journey too, because you may not be able to go straight to the feeling without labeling it, because we're just so used to labeling everything and judging everything. So it can be quite a hard thing sometimes to just sit in that space and kind of go, oh, this energy feels like anger, and you've just got all this story about what anger is and means, and so it can kind of be hard to kind of go, oh, well, don't label it, and so sometimes like looking for it in the body and giving it like almost a identity as such, if you like, can be helpful. But there is like that next step to kind of move past all the label and the judgment altogether, because
as long as you're not going into story with that label, and then as you say, that brings up, like, you label it as anger, and then all of a sudden all this stuff comes up about anger because you've got all these associated stories. So it's a fine line, definitely. Because
a lot of people have say anger, like a lot of people have judgment around anger being a bad expression, like it's but it is just a way to express, that our boundaries are being crossed, really, at the end of the day. That's what anger is about. So it is quite healthy sometimes to express that anger. It just comes down to how we express it. That's when it crosses over into the bad territory, if you like, and people judge it because people do some stupid things out of anger, and very ego-based reaction, and definitely not coming from a conscious space or just expressing their boundaries. It kind of pushes into like a different territories, and that's where it kind of gets that bad name, if you like, sometimes anger. So but they're all just, as Nat was saying, they're all just expressions of energy in our body that we get to play with. And when we do sit in that space and just let that feeling be without labeling it, just noticing how it feels in our body, just keep bringing your attention back to that, just the energy moving in the body, it does pass. Like as Nat said, it just dissipates and goes out of the body. And the more we kept doing that, we don't even need to know the story that's attached to why that anger came up. It's just literally sitting with the energy feeling in the body and letting that move through us. And the story just kind of starts to naturally fall away the more we do that, take the energy out of it.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, is the not attaching to the story where it came from, because that creates the judgment. It's like, oh, I just got angry at my partner. I shouldn't have done that. Like it made them feel bad, blah, blah, blah. And then you're off in storyland about that, and it's not even about the anger anymore. You're like totally forgotten about the feeling that's going on, and you're totally thinking about the actual story. So it really is about letting the story go and going, okay, what am I feeling right now? Okay, I did just yell at my partner. I feel guilty about that. So I'm going to sit with the guilt, not go into the story of how all that played out, how that made them feel, how I did this, what this happened, that was related back to childhood. It just goes on and on and on. And it's sort of like, okay, just park that for a moment, even if you've got to tell your ego, I'm just going to park the story for a moment. I'll come back to it. But right now I want to sit with the feeling of guilt, and just say what you want. Like if you want to sit with that feeling of guilt, then say that, declare it. And funnily enough, you'll be able to do that very easily. And the ego will calm down. Like telling your ego to take a break for a bit actually does work. Like if you're really feeling the stories come up and you're feeling all the craziness of the ego, all the head stuff, then just ask it to take a break for a bit. Say to yourself, I don't need you right now. I'll come back to you shortly, but right now I need to be with this feeling. And then that way you're actually separate from your ego. You're not actually the ego at that point, because you've actually spoken to your ego as a separate identity. And that can be enough to actually sort of allow you to sit purely with the feeling and work through it, whatever's going on for you.
Yeah. And I was going to say, in terms of shadow stuff, I mean, obviously some people have had some quite, horrific stories, say, go on for them. And I can't say that I've had anything, specifically like that happen. So it could be very hard for someone to go in to their shadows, like maybe there's been child abuse or some sexual assault or something like that. And so definitely acknowledge that it's not always that easy to jump straight into it, and you might need some help with that. Like, so, you seek out somebody that could help you move through that if it's not something you feel you can do on your own, to move through it. But there's definitely, that's where all your power lies. But so as much as it feels scary to maybe go to that place, you'll find out that there is just a lot of judgment that's been made up around what happened, and story, and all the different feelings that they just sort of layer on top of each other. Like, the ego is very good at sort of building this entangled web of stories that we'll never, ever get out of if we don't start to move through it. They will just keep running your life, and it's really hard to live infinitely if you're not going to go into that space and see what actually went on. And sometimes it is just a space of bringing some acknowledgement to what actually happened as well, like actually having somebody hear what went on for you and actually not acknowledge that that was really hard. Maybe you've never shared it with somebody before, and actually just expressing it and sharing it with somebody. And maybe that's even you yourself just expressing it. Maybe you're not ready to share it with somebody. Maybe you can write it in a letter and burn it in a fire or something. Do some kind of little ritual around it. That's actually usually quite helpful sometimes when it's a really painful thing. Like, do something like write a letter and burn it in a fire. So it's like this literal kind of, I'm letting this story go now. I'm going to move on from it and free up this energy that's tied up in it, because it takes a lot of energy to keep those stories suppressed. And we don't realize how much energy is tied up in them until we move through them and we start to go, wow, that was really weighing heavy on me, and I did not actually realize how much it influenced every decision I made in my life until you move through it. And it's one of those things that you can't know it until you do it. Like, it's the same thing that we've talked about before, about having that direct experience of something, or even like riding a bike. Like, you don't know how much power is in it until you actually move through it and do that thing. So same with riding a bike. Someone can tell you how to do it, but until you actually do it, you don't have that experience of it yourself. So it seems to be the same thing, that you're the only one in your body, and you're the only one that knows all the aspects of your story that you keep telling yourself, and the judgments and things. So you're the one that needs to actually move through that. And you can have assistance, but you need to be the one to release it for yourself. Somebody can't really do that part for you, unfortunately. So
it's true. It's you're right. You really can't live infinitely while you've got full-on stories that are playing out, and so much power in a particular area of life, or in another person, or another situation that took place in your past, whatever went on. Anything to do with the past will actually drag you out of the now and out of your infinite space. So dealing with the past, and as Mandy said, like, it's not about sitting there analyzing for years on end and processing all that sort of stuff. Sometimes it just needs acknowledgement that it actually took place.
Yes.
And that's enough. Not for everything, obviously. Some stuff is quite full on, but that can be enough to move past a lot of stuff, is actually just that awareness of it and acknowledgement of it. And that's all it needs. It's bringing something to the conscious awareness. So once something becomes to the surface and is consciously made aware of, then it can actually transform. And that's the very thing that transforms it, is that awareness of it. But sorry, go.
No, you go. Keep going.
No, I was going to say, if there's particular areas that you're really, really stuck on, and there's some big stuff that's gone on in your life, then definitely go and have a look at John Demartini's stuff. Grab his book, The Breakthrough Experience. That's where we first started our journey, our transformation journey. And John, I always come back to John's work when something is really hard for somebody to move through. Like if they've experienced sexual assault, or child abuse, or some of the bigger stuff, you know, seeing someone being murdered in the family, or I don't know, something. Something that you just know that is really, really tough to move through, and rightly so. Then the process that he takes people through in terms of rebalancing the mind and finding the positives and negatives in everything again, it's a very head-based thing, but it really does put you back into your heart space again and release a lot of the emotions that are there. Through that process, through that balancing process. And that can be enough sometimes to clear the surface to then go to the next level of transformation, which obviously is the heart-based stuff, not just the mind-based stuff. But when the mind is so caught in a story where you feel so wronged in some way, then that sort of head-based process can actually be really helpful in trying to just balance the mind again, to get it out of the way, and calm the ego down a bit.
Because oftentimes too, like when you're saying with something that has happened, you know, like that in your life, something quite major that sort of completely changed the trajectory of your life, if you like, and it does still run you in a lot of ways, then you do, you know, you are justified in some ways in feeling, you know, that you have been wronged. Like there is nothing wrong with feeling that as well, like that maybe shouldn't have happened, you know, like as a you know, in your storyline, that was like a really suboptimal thing that happened, like, and just bringing some acknowledgement to that, you know, can be really healing for people as well, even just to have somebody outside of you acknowledge that as well, that really painful, and I'm sorry that you actually went through that, but from a really heart-based space of that sometimes is all, not all people need, but it can be like almost 90% of the healing for someone sometimes, because they've just never shared it with somebody or never had it acknowledged or heard by somebody else about what happened. And maybe up until that point, they'd been telling themselves that it was their fault, or that they did something to attract that to them. Like, so we can go into all that space as well, that it was all something that we did or didn't do that kind of caused that thing to happen as well. So especially if it's a childhood thing too, because we don't understand the world as a child and our consciousness and things like that, and we just sort of see what happens in the outside world, and we make it think that we did something to cause that to happen. It maybe had nothing to do with us at the end of the day. It was the other person's story and what was going on for them, and we just happened to be a part of their story. I was going to say more from the infinite space, and this is like obviously a big step if you still haven't moved through a lot of shadow stuff as well, but the ultimate kind of overall sort of perspective of it all, I guess, is that we are an infinite being, and we've created this human game. So we've created our stories for some reason to play out the way that they have. So the things that happen to us, we've put them in our storyline to wake ourselves up to that as well. So it's kind of can be helpful sometimes to kind of say, well, this is happening for me. I put this here for some reason. Like maybe you can't see that for now. Like you'd be thinking, why the hell would I put myself through that? But that's the ego that asks those questions. That's the thing. It's like the infinite soul at the end of the day is here to have an expansive journey and to experience all the emotions, and there is no judgment on the emotions. It's only the ego that's doing that. So the more we can put ourselves back into that infinite space, knowing that it is a story, it's purely a story. And the point I was going to make around that was just that the more we don't look at the stories, the more we keep reinforcing them. So it's the more we don't want to go into the hard stuff. Like the ego wants to keep us out of that because it wants to stay alive. Basically, at the end of the day, if we start seeing all the illusions, the ego doesn't have much power anymore. So but we don't. If we don't look at those stories, they will keep running us the whole time. So we have to kind of go into them to see for what they are, to pull the power out of that, so then they can start to dissolve around us. We don't need to keep them going because they aren't true at the end of the day. So if we want to live infinitely, like, let's start acknowledging them for what they are and rewrite the story, as we've been talking about, like change it from the inside out, because that's the only way it is going to shift, by going into the energy and seeing it for what it is.
Yeah, and the story really does hold the clues, doesn't it? When you go in and you're not actually in the story, you're actually observing the story, and it's like you've written the story, if you like, or you've created a movie of the story and you're now watching it. You're not actually in it anymore, but it's like watching watching a movie or reading a book, you're actually part of the story in terms of your imagination and, you know, your own take on that story, I guess, particularly when you're reading, because there's no visual sort of thing. So you've got to create the story in your mind's eye about what is actually being painted in words. But you're still outside of the story. You're not being affected. You can close the book and you can turn the movie off. You're not affected by the story at all in those terms. And that's really starting to get to see your own story and your own life like that as well. It's like you can walk away from stories whenever you want.
Yes.
It is possible, but the stories too can hold the clues to where you've actually left little nuggets of your power behind in situations or people or you know, physical items. So it is definitely worth looking at the story as well, but just not in the story.
Yes. Yeah. And sometimes you might need to remove yourself from circumstances that perhaps keep holding you in the story as well too. So sometimes you might find you have to physically move away maybe from somewhere or leave a job, or maybe it's a loved one that kind of just reminds you every single time of that story, and maybe you find it really hard to face that story when you're in that physical presence all the time. So maybe you might need to remove yourself from situations perhaps, or as well, until you feel like you can take your power back out of that story. If you find you keep getting triggered by something and you find it really hard to kind of let that judgment go perhaps of what's happened to you or what you perceive's kind of been happening, a lot of the time it's our own story that we made up around something too. It might not have actually been how it went down, but we have our own filters and we run it through that too. And so maybe that person just reminds you of it every single time, and the slightest thing they do just like annoys the crap out of you because it just triggers that little memory all the time, that little judgment you have of yourself or the belief you have too. So sometimes you might need to remove yourself from the outside world a little bit, or shut yourself off a bit from watching news or something like that, just stuff that kind of keeps you in that space of never kind of letting that emotion move through your body. Like it just keeps it running as this low level anxiety thing we've talked about before. Sometimes there's just like this stress that's just constantly in the body, that, you know, maybe have a look at your physical environment too and how you can help yourself to move through some of the things too, because we often are not aware sometimes of how much we keep ourselves in stuff as well. Like we just don't look around enough to kind of sort of think, oh, well, that's actually not really helpful for me to have the radio going all the time, or to hear that news each night, or to, I don't know, maybe it's, I don't know, I'm just thinking like maybe it's your best friend that triggers you a lot and they call you like all the time when something's going on. And so maybe you've got to put boundaries around that, like, and just kind of go, you know what, like, this is not helping me right now, and you need to have a conversation around that. So sometimes there is just things we can be putting into place to help us on that journey too, to not have the story running all the time, so that we've got a bit of space. We can give it a little bit of space to see what's actually going on, and then start to look at the stuff that's coming up around that too. And sometimes it is a process. It isn't something that's going to drop away overnight. If it is a big story that you've had running, you know, your whole life. So I probably had one running around self-worth for like a while, like since childhood, kind of thing about, I'm not enough kind of thing. And that's probably a very common one that people tend to have, that I'm not enough. Everybody else knows what they're doing. I don't have anything to bring to the world, or whatever that story is that we have kind of going on. That can be a big one to kind of undo.
I think that's a very common one, because that's really the premise of the ego.
Yes,
the ego will always say it's not enough, so it looks more in everything. Yes.
So that can be one to that will take some time to undo, but it doesn't mean that you don't feel more and more expansive each time you move through a layer of it, sort of thing. So it's still worth kind of trying to tackle a bigger one, because it will come up. Situations will just present in life for you to see the next layer of that thing that's coming up. So you might travel along fine for a while, and then next thing you have a situation that kind of triggers that thing again. You're like, oh wow, that I thought I kind of moved through that one. There's that pattern again, sort of thing. I'm doing that again, or that belief I had about myself. I'm putting myself down and the other person up all the time. Like, what's that about, kind of thing. So that's where John Demartini's work would really assist, actually, with that process, because it is that whole up and down, positive, negative, that Nat was talking about, and bringing things back into balance. So Yeah, so it is a journey, but you have, we don't have to do anything at the end of the day, but like if you want to be playing infinitely, you do have to look at some of the shadow stuff that's coming up and address it for what it is and let it move through you, and learn how to not label things and judge things and just feel it, and release the energy that's tied up in, as I said, and see how much more energy you actually have to put into the creative stuff, rather than the boring stories that keep us stuck. So
yeah, I think that's it. You start to realize how boring the stories actually are. Like I've said the same thing to Jodie a few times about different things, like the money story that just seems to go on and on in our lives. It's like, man, I'm so bored with this story. Like, I'm just done. Like I've got no more energy for it.
Yeah.
So it's just quite funny. You just reach that stage. It's like, I just can't be bothered anymore. Like putting energy into some of these stories. It's a lot more fun just being infinite and just sort of creating and being in that space. It's like really different. The energy is totally different. And then you do start to see how boring the stories are and how uncreative they actually are.
Yeah,
like it's so ridiculously uncreative. It's really funny.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's probably a good point what you're just saying. And I think we talked about this in another talk a few days ago. I can't think exactly which one it was, but it was talking about putting the focus more on the play and the creativity aspect. Like the more we do that, and I think it was the hard work, the talk we did around hard work actually could have been about that the more we put our time and energy into something that we really just love to do for the sake of doing it. It doesn't have to be our job if that's not what it is, but something that we just love to do, and we put our focus more and more into that, you'll just notice how much the stories start to drop away because you're not putting your energy into them anymore like you used to. You've shifted your focus more into the infinite creation now and playing with that, and life starts to flow in that direction. So wherever we put our focus is where our energy goes. So if we want more creativity and play in our life, then we need to actually bring that stuff into our life and actually do something with it, not say, oh, I'll do that one day, which I was very good at doing that kind of thing, saying, oh, I'll get to that creative stuff one day, because I mean, I do graphic design, so I'm doing that sort of more for work sometimes. But even just letting myself say paint or something, like it was always something I really want to do, but I'll do this first and then I'll get to that thing. It's kind of like, so I had an intuitive lady that I'd had a reading with, and she sort of said that to me. She said, you need to be doing something creative every day. She said, it doesn't matter if it's 5 minutes, like it doesn't matter what the activity is. It's just, you got to do something to keep that energy flowing, because she said it's really strong in you. Like, and if you're not acknowledging, you start to cause blockages in your system, almost like your energy system. And it will start to play out then in the stories in your life. And I could so see where that was happening. I would put the stop on it all the time, because the ego story would take more of a hold. Oh, I need to do this first, or this is more important. Yeah, and that was all running from, these underlying stories that we've talked about of like, okay, well, what's underneath that? Maybe there is a feeling of I'm not enough if I don't do that thing and get that acknowledgement, or I don't make that money. What's going to happen if I don't have money in my account, because I have a story around value being tied into money, or, so you have to start pulling apart all your stories and seeing how they all fit together. But putting that focus more on the creative stuff too will actually help you to dissolve some of those other stories as well, because
definitely
focus is going into that. And sometimes doing the creative stuff actually brings up some of those patterns for you to see really clearly, and they don't have as much power because you're not sort of you're not in them as much, like, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like when you see it from more a creative space, you're just kind of looking at it as more of an observer from the outside, and it feels like so much easier to let it go. So I guess that's where that concept of art therapy comes from a little bit too, like using painting and drawing as a way to actually move through stuff too. And a lot of artists will put their stuff into their artwork, like for that very reason. It's a way to move through their stories, and it's an expression, and to get it out of your body and just see it for what it is, like turn it into a creation rather than a limitation still.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think we touched on it in the other conversation we had about consciously creating as opposed to creating by default. So if you're not doing creative projects and you're not consciously creating what you want, then you will create by your belief systems and your patterns, and just the same story over and over again. Don't expect anything different, because That's all it knows how to do.
Yeah.
So it's, we do have to really take control of that, I guess, or not take control in the human sense, but allow our infinite self to take back control and allow, just follow the flow as far as creativity is concerned. I just wanted to say hi to Jasmine. She's back.
Hello.
Said juicy deep chats. Very true. Here's the more creative, expansive stories. Absolutely.
Yep.
And this one, when I go for my daily nature walks, I have started taking flower bulbs with me and planting them in the wild, creating new gardens. Oh wow! Simple, but as you were saying, it's proving to be quite powerful as I get back into creating with my hands again. That's really awesome. I love that.
Cool.
Hands into nature and in the dirt, and can't go too wrong with that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well done. That's awesome.
Yeah, I think that bringing that focus back into the things that we enjoy doing. That notice how you feel when you do those things. Like what Jasmine was just saying, it's like the more you do those things, you feel so free and expansive. So what activities can you be doing with in your life that bring you that feeling? Like the more we can do that, the more we sort of come to know ourselves then as that space and not the little tight, tensed up little ball of stories that we sort of get stuck in sometimes. And our body's always a really good guide for that. Yeah, it's like as we've spoken about before, it's just like the more we can. We're often so not aware of how tense we actually hold our bodies. Like when we sit, like I know I hold a lot in my shoulders and my neck in particular.
Your neck, yeah.
Almost like I can feel like if I'm thinking about something or I'm caught up in a story, like I'm actually like hunching my shoulders up around my neck, and like you sort of don't even realize sometimes, like, and it's just like some of them when we're doing these talks, I'm not necessarily stressed, but it's become like just a natural way sometimes of sitting sometimes, and I have to almost like kind of go, I'll put my shoulders down a bit and just stretch my neck up a bit, and you just got to kind of notice sometimes those things that we hold ourselves, those patterns we hold ourselves into, or we breathe really shallow when we're stressed out too. We don't take big deep breaths, and so even just that type of thing about taking out 5 or 10 deep breaths and go stand outside in the sun for 2 minutes or something, and just take those little reset moments and notice how different we feel too. So
the sun's a big one. I did that today. I was starting to feel a bit overwhelmed and just sort of like feeling like really sluggish, and I was like, so Jody goes, oh, what's up? And I was like, I don't know, just something. I don't know. I can't even pinpoint what it is. And I just went, I just need to go and lay in the sun for a while. So I just went in the bedroom and the sun was actually coming through, and I was like, oh my God, this is so nice. So I just drifted off for a bit and then came back and I was good again. I was just like, oh, that's all I needed was a hit of sunshine. Like, this felt so different.
Recharge. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really nice. Yeah.
Yes.
Just I was saying that the flowers are blooming, and so it's creativity is giving back. That's really cool.
Yep. Yeah, it's starting to be almost springtime here in the southern hemisphere. So Jasmine's in New Zealand. So I was just literally looking out the window this morning of the house sit that we've just arrived back at, and noticing the difference because I've been away for 3 weeks. And so yes, it's still cold here. There's a big dumping of snow on the mountains yesterday, so it was really cold. Right. Got back here, but just noticing the garden, like all the flowers are out, like the daffodils are out and the camellias are out, and
you always know it's springtime when the daffodils come out.
So I was just looking at the date going, oh wow, we're only a week out from spring. Like it's just kind of, I didn't even realize that winter had gone so fast. Like it just has flown by in some ways, and it will still be cold for a little bit longer, but just having the brightness and the colors around you sometimes so energizing to kind of see that again. Yeah, all coming back to life. Seeing the colors in particular. Yeah. Love seeing
very cool seeing spring after winter, isn't it? Like seeing, as you say, the colors come back after.
Yeah.
Well, it wasn't too white where you are, but in a lot of countries it's just pure whiteness for like 6 months of the year.
But even that's actually probably a really good analogy. I'm just thinking with the way nature's always like a very good sign for us of how like just the natural flow of life. So winter, we go into winter and a lot of trees will shed their leaves completely, and they'll just be bare trees, and there's never usually any flowers. There's there's occasional thing that flowers in wintertime, but it's not very common. So everything kind of goes into that dormant space. So it is a little bit almost like going into the shadow space again, and then spring is like that renewal again. We come out with that new energy, and new creativity and new ways of being and new life. You know, there's always little babies being born in springtime, little baby birds and calves being born and all that type of stuff. So it is that almost like a good metaphor for moving into the shadows and moving out of the shadows again, and the new energy.
Fantastic time to be doing that. Yeah, winter's a great time to be hibernating and spending time, particularly in places like the northern hemisphere where it's actually really dark, like in the top part.
Yeah,
you get 8 hours of sunshine if you're lucky, type thing, and then you're back in darkness again. So most of the day is darkness. It's really quite interesting to spend time up in Canada and the UK and stuff like that. And that's what we'll be doing, actually. We'll have Christmas in Edinburgh, so we'll be getting really short days.
Yep.
And then we're going to Canada after that, and it'll be still snowing, and that'll be the last week in January. So we'll have that experience again in winter, and we actually really enjoy it. I love it. Just having that hibernation time and quieter time and more reflective. It's actually really cool. Yeah. Nice. Excellent. I'm going to hold my body and shifting all postures. Yeah. It is quite interesting, isn't it? Where you hold all your patterns actually in your body.
Yep.
Here's our hunch over, leaning forward.
Yeah. Or even if you have things like digestive problems going on, sometimes it's because we're not letting ourselves process stuff. Like we're not letting ourselves process emotions sometimes. And so our gut doesn't work properly sometimes because we're just not letting it pass through. So our body often gives us good signs of where things are being held in the body. As we said, the tension in particular is a big one. I think most people, when there is a story running that holds a lot of power, it does cause stress in the body. It affects your nervous system. And that will play out however that's going to play out for you. Like in a lot of the time it is just that tense muscles or back catches. Sometimes you get like a little nerve twinge all the time or something that you usually probably have something to, if you pay attention, that happens when you're in a really stressed state, when you really pay attention to it. So you can use them as little triggers sometimes to remind you. Like I get that. I used to get migraines. Well, Nat did too, and so did our mum. Used to get migraines a lot when we were growing up, and probably less and less. Well, for me, I know I get them less and less now. I don't get them very often at all now.
Get them at all.
Yeah, I'm quite aware now of what brings them on. And it's always when I'm putting major pressure on myself, like to do something or be something or, not look at something. So it's kind of like I know when the feeling's coming on now, and I can usually kind of go, oh, there's that feeling. Okay, what was I doing that was kind of bringing that on? And I can usually avoid getting a migraine now. So it's kind of quite interesting when you are aware of the things that bring stuff on for you now. Like you can actually push, like circumvent, I can't find the right word, but you can kind of like circle around the thing and not actually get the physical symptom on in your body now, because you're aware. You
deal with it first.
The stuff, the shadow stuff that's coming up, to actually have a look at the stuff that's not real anymore.
Yeah.
And let it go. So So.
Very cool. Very cool.
Well, it's almost, oh no, the bells don't ring at midnight there? No,
the bells are not ringing at midnight. Otherwise I'd be screaming. No, definitely not. But it's 20 past 12 here. My battery I'm just watching my battery on my computer actually go down, and I have to get up and plug it in. So we might wind it up there if that's okay. Because I'm really getting quite tired right now after a day of work. So we'll be back in a few hours, probably about 12 hours time for another topic.
It feels true for us to show up each day, so we're still sticking to that. Right now, we've still got it in before Nat's clock's turned midnight, so still technically the 22nd for her. So
Yes. Did it. Another day.
Back for another infinite lucky drip draw topic tonight, or tonight my time, Nat's.
Your time, yes. About 12 hours time.
Probably.
Yay. Sounds good. Well, thank you, Jasmine, for joining us. It was lovely to have you around. Probably a good time in the afternoon for you.
No, she's a morning. She's been morning. 2 hours ahead of me, so about 10:20. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, it's pretty early for you guys. Yeah. True.
Yeah.
Very cool.
All right. Well, we shall see you later. Thanks for joining, and let us know in the comments anything that might have come up for you around this topic, or how you might move through the shadow stuff. Do you get stuck in the positive thinking all the time, or do you find it hard to go into the shadows? Like, let us know how.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah, definitely share. That'd be great.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right.
Catch you soon.
Till tomorrow. Well, later today.
Bye.